van full of explosives, and what happened to the people in the van? Why the media, they only picked up on that story, like the first hour it came out, and then that story was dead. You were in the media, and you still are. Who decides to hide things of that magnitude?
Look, let's face the fact about the mainstream media. It is terrified. Now, yes, it has its own stooges inside. I mean, in America, people like Krauthammer, for example, I mean, they are just Zionist stooges. But by and large, the mainstream Western media, and in particular the American media, is terrified of offending Zionism, either at all or too much. Now, why? There are a number of reasons. The main reason, Hesham, is very simple. Newspapers do not make their money from selling newspapers. They make their money from selling the advertising space in the newspapers. And they are frightened that if they offend Zionism too much, the advertising revenue will be pulled. That's one main reason. There is another one. Nobody in public life likes to be accused, even though it's invariably false and malicious, of being charged with anti-Semitism. That can destroy careers. So, put those two things together and you have very, very powerful reasons for not wanting to offend Zionism.
But Alan, 1 million Iraqis died because of a lie. And you're telling me that those people in the media, just so not to offend Zionism, they would see 1 million Iraqis dead?
Well, all right. How do you think I mentioned the attack on the Liberty? Now, if that had been an Arab attack on the Liberty that killed 37 American servicemen and wounded many others, America would have gone to war with that Arab country. But it wasn't even investigated. It was covered up. Now, why do you think the American media covered that up? They know what happened.
Let me ask you this. You were with the BBC. I mean, the mainstream media that you're talking about, you were part of that media. So how come with the BBC and ITN, why they did not tell the truth?
Well, I'll make a confession to you. I spent most of my reporting life for ITN and the BBC's Panorama program peddling Zionist mythology, and I tell you why. When you're my age, I'm a young 68. I was born during World War II. You come out of your mother's womb conditioned to believe Zionism's version of events. And I spent most of my reporting life peddling what I now know to have been Zionist propaganda. I mean, very quickly, the two biggest lies of Zionist propaganda are, one, poor little Israel has lived in danger all its life of annihilation, the driving into the sea of its Jews. So that's what I reported in my television reporting days. Israel's existence has never, ever been in danger from any combination of Arab force. Not in 1947-48, not in 1956, not in 1967, not even in 1973. So Israel's entire story is a fabrication. There are many journalists who know this, but they won't report it. I didn't report it. I didn't know the truth until towards the end of the 1970s. I began to engage with Arafat, first in secret politics, and then I lived with him and his leadership colleagues for nearly a year to talk their story out of them. And it was only by doing that that my eyes were opened, Hesham, to the truth of history.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this. When you talk to other journalists about peddling the bloody Israeli Zionist propaganda, did they agree with you, or how many, let's say the percentage of journalists that we see every day peddling the Israelis propaganda, what's the percentage of those who actually they know they're doing that?
There are many good journalists in the BBC, for example. But the bottom line is they have mortgages to pay and kids to educate. Do I make the point?
So what you're saying is we really don't have media.
No, we don't. Now, I tell you, when I joined ITN as a very young journalist, and that was in the days when ITN, Independent Television News, used to beat the BBC night after night, its first great editor gave me the mission statement in one short sentence. He said, "Our job is to help keep democracy alive." Hesham, my charge today is that the mainstream media has betrayed democracy.
Definitely. Because it has been nothing but a mouthpiece for Zionist propaganda.
Yeah.
And this probably what you just said, that applies to the United States more than any other place.
Yes, it does. But I mean, I'll give you one example. The BBC has a very good Middle East correspondent, Jeremy Bowen. You're probably aware of Jeremy. Now, he goes as far as he can to tell the truth from time to time. But every 3 months or so, the Zionist lobby in this country tries to get him fired. So he'll go so far with the truth, and then he has to pull back for weeks or months. You know, just put yourself in the position of a BBC. You've got a wife, you've got a kid, you've got a mortgage to pay, you've got kids to educate, and you've got all these false charges of anti-Semitism coming at you. That's an awful lot of hassle for a busy journalist. You don't want it. You don't need it.
But Alan, get out of that job. Don't lie to people. Don't feed your children money. Because if you do that, then basically there's no ethics, none whatsoever, in someone who will stay in this business when he knows that he's selling lies and he's getting paid for it.
Well, Hesham, that's exactly why I got out of it. But I was only able to do that because I'm quite rare in journalism in this sense. I've been married to the same wonderful woman for 48 years, and she allowed me to put everything on the line. My career, our house, everything. To write my last book, I had to mortgage my house I once owned to raise the money to keep myself going.
You know, it's amazing. You know, we shame prostitutes for what they do, but yet we have journalists doing worse than that. They are prostituting their conscience.
Yeah, well, as I said just now to you, they have betrayed democracy.
Now,
I mean, there are a few good journalists around, Robert Fisk, John Pilger, but there really aren't very many in the mainstream media because they're not allowed to tell the truth even if they want to. But what 9/11 served, Zionism needs enemies. It's the only way it presents itself as the victim. That's the only way it can say we're not responsible, it's everybody else's fault. So what 9/11 did for them, it helped to set in motion Islamophobia.
Mm-hmm.
It helped to underwrite Israel's mad claim that they are the victims.
Okay. Now, you said the Arab regimes are all controlled by Zionists. Can you explain that?
I said Zionism has agents deep inside all of them.
Okay. I mean, they're influencing
their politics.
They're influencing their decisions, right?
Yeah. I can't name him, but I'll tell you a story. A very major Arab royal I met secretly in London a year ago, and he volunteered. He said, your book is so important for Americans, I'm going to put up the money to make available 1,000 copies of each of your volume 1, 2, and 3 for Americans to help inform and educate Americans. Now, I didn't ask for the money. He made that promise. He confirmed it in writing. And then he went back to his capital, and nothing happened. Because the Zionist in his establishment said no.
Now, what was his position in his government?
Well, I'm not going to name him. He's a very, very major Arab figure.
No, I mean, is he a president? Is he a king?
He's just settle for the fact that he's a royal.
Okay.
You see, initially, what the Arab regimes hated, they didn't want there to be a regeneration of Palestinian nationalism. They wanted that file to stay closed as of 1948-49. And then along came this little guy called Arafat, and with a few others, Abu Jihad and co. They lit the slow-burning fire of the regeneration of nationalism. But who were the first people to move to try and put out the fire? It was the intelligence services of Egypt, Jordan, and Lebanon. It wasn't the Israelis.
So I guess the only...
The Arabs... I tell you what the Arabs really feared about Arafat's PLO. Despite all of its flaws, it was actually democratic. And what none of the Arab leaders wanted was a state of Palestine that would be democratic, because that democracy would be very contagious, and it would undermine all these impotent, corrupt Arab regimes.
So the only hope for Palestinians now is to actually see an uprising all over the Arab world to topple these regimes.